Hi, everybody. Gumshoe Stories here with another live. I figured it would be kind of a cool thing to do it today. We're a few weeks past the end of April and the end of the month that was the 5 year anniversary of the murder of Missy Bevers, which remains unsolved. And so I thought, you know, maybe we should have a live lunch here in the middle of the week. Give us a chance to kind of debrief what happened in April and what we found out that might have been new and what police had to say, and um, and just go from there. Kind of debrief, as I said. So we're gonna take a look back and see what Midlothian Police Department had to say when they issued their press release, which was the first time they had issued one of those in 2 years. Was there anything new in there? Not so much, a little bit, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. We'll also talk a little bit about Dr. Nierenberg, the forensic podiatrist, and the CBS station in Dallas that put together a special about Missy Beavers' anniversary of her murder, and had the doctor as a guest, and we'll talk about what he had to say, and kind of go from there. There's some interesting things I thought that came out of that. The other thing I want to do today, which I think is going to be pretty cool, is we're going to look at something that someone did on Web Sleuths back at the beginning of this case. Someone with a lot of medical and technical illustration information and background and expertise, who kind of created an animation of what this suspect looks like when you get all the garb off, all the police tactical gear, the what the suspect might actually look like using professional techniques to remove the helmet and the tactical vest and all that. And I think it reveals some interesting things about the body type of the suspect. I think it really reveals some interesting information about the gait and the way the feet turn out. So we'll get to that here in just a little bit. We're just kind of taking a moment to let some people come in, and I know I didn't give a lot of advance notice that we were going to do this live today, so it may take a little bit for people to find their way in. I see Sonino Scardelletti is in here. Good to have you, Sonino. Melody McAtee is here. Thank you for joining us, Melody, and hope you guys are doing well today. It's good to have you. Just want to say that if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so, and tell your friends, so that when we do have a live or other content that I post to my YouTube channel, then you'll easily be able to get to it. And if you want to, as you come in, if you want to tell me where you guys are from, then please do so. Let's kind of get a roll call of where people are today, whether that's in the United States or abroad. I'd like to hear where people are from. That's always good. I'm in Texas, nowhere near where Missy Bevers was murdered, because it's a big state. But for those who've ever wondered, I do live in Texas here in the United States. Melody's in Indiana. Okay, the state that is represented, unfortunately, in the Delphi murders. Melody, I don't know if you've been following the Delphi murders. I imagine, being in that state, you probably would. What do you think about the gentleman that's the new person of interest that was arrested in another incident that they think might perhaps be involved in Delphi? Let me know your thoughts on that, Melody, and see who else. We've got a few people trickling in. We've got about 10 people in here now, so that's good. Just kind of reiterating what we want to do today. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about what Midlothian police said last month in their press release about the 5-year anniversary. We're going to talk about the CBS local Dallas station putting out their special on the Missybevers murder, which had some new information from the forensic podiatrist, Dr. Michael Nierenberg. So we'll talk about that. We're going to show a very interesting Green Man animation of the suspect. This was done by someone with professional expertise at Photoshop and medical and technical illustration that did some interesting work to show us another look at the suspect as you've never seen that suspect before, and see what it shows us. Okay, Dee Dee is from Louisiana, and yeah, they have gasoline in Louisiana, not so much in, say, Georgia and North Carolina, other states on the East Coast. I've got some relatives, some loved ones in the Carolinas that, I made sure and told them yesterday that you might want to fill up while you can. I think Charlotte, North Carolina, only about 35% of the stations, the gas stations, have any fuel to give. So it's hopefully a situation that they will get corrected in the next few days coming out of that hacking that was done of Colonial Pipeline. Rowan, to you, glad to have you here with us, and just glad to have everybody here. It's the middle of the week. It's almost the middle of May, and things are starting to open up coronavirus wise a little bit, so that's good. Hopefully we're all going to have a good summer and get back to some semblance of normal activity. Washington State, no gas run there, says Roland to you. Yeah, I don't think I don't think most of the country is going to be affected by that. I think it's going to be mainly the East Coast because of the way that pipeline runs. I guess the path that it takes, it's mostly the southeast and then going up into the northeast, I believe. But my interest was in Georgia and the Carolinas because of loved ones that I have there. All right, well, as we get into this, what I'd like to do is I'm going to see if I can share my screen here a little bit, and we will get to the Midlothian Police Department press release that they did last month. Give me just a second to do that. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that, and hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Let me just scroll up a little bit on this because I think it's halfway down. Okay. And then let me see if I can do anything else to make it more full screen. Just a second here. Full screen layout. Here we go. Maybe that'll help a little bit. Can you guys read the writing there? I hope you can, but what I want to do is just kind of summarize this for those who maybe didn't get a chance to read this at the time last month, or maybe just need a refresher on what was said. Midlothian Police Department does consider the case still an active investigation. They continue to explore all leads, which is good. They say they're determined to see it reach closure. A lot of this information is kind of repeated from previous years and previous press releases. But I do want to get to this part, that the paragraph that starts with, "We have added a retired federal agent." And yeah, that's probably the most interesting bit of information that came from Midlothian Police, is that they did add actually two different individuals to their team recently. One is a retired federal agent who is joining their team of investigators, and his primary responsibility is the examination of the Missybevers case. But additionally, they also have a new commander over the Criminal Investigation Division. So this is the person who is like the boss of the detectives. And he's an experienced homicide detective, which is, yay, that's a very good thing that we have detectives with homicide experience. That was not the case when this incident happened in 2016, but they've gradually upped to the ante on having some detectives who have worked homicides before. And this commander came from a major metroplex agency. I believe it was Arlington. Don't quote me on that for sure, but I believe it's from Arlington. Hey, Dr. Tuttle, glad to have you with us from Addison, Texas. Okay, and back to the press release. They've added these two investigators, and they're hoping that advancement in technology and new investigative techniques developed over the past 5 years will lead to a conclusion. That, again, is a repeat of things that they said before in previous press releases, just kind of boilerplate. Yeah, we think there's new things that are coming along that are going to help. Well, I would certainly hope so. Now, this next part is interesting to me. Let's look at this a little bit. This paragraph that starts, "It is our sincere belief that collaboration with the public is what will eventually lead us to solve this crime. We believe that someone may have a vital piece of information that to this date is unknowingly being withheld. We appeal to the community to please contact the Midlothian Police Department, regardless of how insignificant they may think their information may be." And those are good words, but let me just point out something here. And let me switch away from this back to putting me in there. Okay. So here's my issue. This would have been a wonderful time for Midlothian Police to release something new, a little bit more footage, some piece of information. We know they've got lots of information that the public doesn't know about. And yes, they do need to safeguard what we call information only the killer would know, or guilty information. Yes, they need to do that, but they could give us something that would help move this case along, and something that would help to maybe clarify some aspects of this case. Like, if you're looking for someone to give a tip, then is it really an Ultima that you're looking for, like we've always thought? You threw an infinity in there. Are we really looking for an infinity? I don't think so. You can see elsewhere on my YouTube channel where I've posted some content that basically rules out, I believe, the infinity. And then they throw out or similar vehicle, like maybe it's not an Ultima, maybe it's not an infinity. Come on. If you want someone to bring forward a tip that maybe the suspect has said something to them and they're going to come forward and talk to police, then they need to have an accurate overview of this case to know whether what they're hearing from the suspect is something that they need to come to the police with. Like, for instance, let's say that you're a young lady at a bar and there's a guy sitting next to you at the bar, and you strike up a conversation, and he has a little bit too much to drink. You don't know him. He's a stranger. He starts sharing with you that maybe he killed somebody at some point in the past. And you're like, no, you didn't. And then he gives you a little bit of information. Says, yeah, it was a lady, and I forget what kind of building she was in, but she came in while I was burglarizing it. And I was driving a Ford van, and I killed her with a knife, and yeah, that's what I did. Well, this person is going to look at the information about the case, and they're going to know, okay, I don't need to call Midlothian and tell them about this, because this guy's talking about something else. He's just either making it up, or maybe he committed some other murder, but certainly not the Missybevers murder because there's nothing about a van and there's nothing about a knife. Um, but maybe there's a little more subtle thing that he tells her in the bar. Maybe he says, "Yeah, I killed a lady, but I shot her." Well, police have never said anything publicly about Missy being shot. Now, we know, we've talked about this before, that she was shot. Go to murderdata.org. You can also see on my YouTube channel, there in my playlists, there's something where you can see somebody drill down in that data and find the cause of death is by gunshot. But it's nothing that's been publicized, and there's still a zillion people out there who have no idea or who don't believe that she was shot. So this woman, in this hypothetical, being in a bar talking to a guy, and he says that he shot a woman, unless she's deep dived this case and followed this YouTube channel or other sources that have talked about the gunshot, how is she going to know to contact Midlothian police and tell them about it? That is my point. Is on the one hand, police are saying it's vital, that the public come forward with tips, and that's going to be what breaks this case open. But at the same time, the public doesn't really have the accurate information that might produce the tips. So is there someone out there who's had the suspect talk to them and they have no idea that the clues that he dropped were about the Missybevers case because they were clues that haven't been publicly talked about by police? So that is kind of my issue there with with what was said by police. Let me get back to where we were. Okay. Let's go back to the comments and let's take a look at what people are saying. Scroll down a little bit. Okay, Rowan, to you, you're saying you can't remember. Is there DNA, fingerprints, or anything else, I guess, in Missy's case? Actually, there is DNA, or was DNA. And let me tell you about this because a lot of people may not even know about that. But at about the 1 year mark or 2 year mark of this case, and you can Google this, I can find a link and put it in the description later, but you can find a link to an article that was in the Waxahachie Daily Light. That's the newspaper from right next door to Midlothian in Waxahachie, where Kevin Johnson, who was then the assistant chief of police, now retired, no longer with the department, but at that time he was still there and was the spokesman on the case. And he said that there was DNA. And there was a discussion in this article about facial compositing and how other departments have taken DNA and have been able to produce a sketch of what the suspect's face looks like, or an approximation of it anyway, from DNA sampling. And so the question was, is that something that police could do in this case? So what Kevin Johnson said was that they did get some DNA, and he referred to it as a partial mixed sample. Now, what does that mean? I would love to have a DNA guest on at some point and do a podcast on that. But here's what I know about it. This is certainly me as a layman, but my understanding, a mixed sample, we pretty much know that means that it's the suspect's blood mixed with Missybevers. Well, I say blood, not necessarily blood. Let's just say DNA, because it could be skin cell, could be other fluids, could be blood, could be spit. I mean, who knows? But it's DNA mixed between the suspect and Missybevers. Doesn't mean that it's unusable, because it's mixed. Because let's think about a rape kit. A woman is raped, she goes into the hospital, they take DNA. That's always going to be a mixed sample, right? Because it's going to be a mixture of her DNA and the person who assaulted her. And they're able to extract the DNA from the two individuals. Now, my understanding is that the success of it can sometimes depend upon how much of that sample is the suspect's DNA versus the victim's DNA. I think it might be a little more difficult if 90% of it or 95% of it is the victim's DNA and only 5 to 10% of it is the suspect's DNA. If it's more 50-50, it might be easier. We don't have any way of knowing the details of this DNA in the Missybevers case. We don't know in this mixture how much of it was suspect and how much of it was Missy. But they did get a mixed sample. And then they said it's also a partial sample. What does that mean? A partial sample means that they don't have the whole string. So imagine, let's say you've got an actual length of string, and in that string at various intervals across it, you've got knots, different unique knots that have been tied into this length of string, dozens of them or hundreds, whatever. Okay, and each of them are unique. So in DNA terms, they call those knots markers. So if you were to find this entire length of string, and let's say there were a whole bunch of other strings out there that were a lot like this, except that the knots were unique. They were, done a different way, whatever. Got a lot of them out there, but you recover part of one string. And then you're tasked with determining, well, where did this string come from compared to all the other strings out there? And you look at the piece of string and you've got 20 knots across it. And maybe in a library somewhere, there's information about the different strings and the knots and what the sequence are that they're in and everything. So if you've got 20 of those knots in that strand that you recovered from that string, that's pretty decent. And you might be able to figure out who that string belonged to, where it was manufactured, whatever. Kind of the same with DNA. You have markers. I believe that the minimum number of markers for DNA to be uploaded to CODIS, which is the criminal database that has the DNA of all the criminals, I believe that that's 20 markers. So for instance, if this partial sample of DNA was from Missy and it was only 10 markers, that's a partial sample. It doesn't have all the markers, and it doesn't even have enough maybe to enter it into CODIS. Now that's just an example. I don't know how many markers were in that sample, but my understanding is with it being a partial sample, it's not enough to maybe enter into CODIS and compare to to others who are already in there to see if maybe an existing person who's in prison might be a match or whatever. I don't know. Maybe it is enough. Maybe they have entered it into CODIS and they just haven't had a hit. But however many markers there are, there just were not enough for them to be able to figure out exactly who this person was. Now, they didn't say that the DNA was totally useless. They were just saying that it wasn't sufficient for doing the facial compositing. And I'm sure the facial compositing, you'd need to have many, many more than 20 markers. You'd need to have maybe almost the whole strand of DNA or whatever the terminology is. So they weren't able to do that, but they didn't say they weren't able to do anything with it. So that raises the question, have they been able to tell by DNA what the gender of this person is? If they have, they haven't told us. So we don't know whether they're, after a male or female still. That would be nice to know if they know. The other thing is there enough DNA there that maybe, just maybe, they can eliminate suspects using it? That would be helpful. So, for instance, I won't say his name, but the former police officer who was once a person of great interest to police in this case, And then it was kind of strange how they cleared him when his alibi was being home at 3 a.m. with his wife and baby. Um, how do you confirm that as police and definitively clear somebody? Well, not based on alibi for sure, right? But maybe they cleared him based on the fact that they got enough DNA that they could compare to his DNA and see that, well, they don't know who the person is, but they know it's not him. Or maybe they got enough to determine gender, and they determined that the gender is a woman, perhaps, in which case, obviously, he's not the person because he's not a woman. So, but that's what we know about DNA. That was several years ago. We can only hope that when they did that DNA testing with a private lab for the facial compositing, that it wasn't a consumptive test. Do you know what that is? Consumptive test is when you use up all of your sample and you have none left, so you can't do any further testing after that. Hopefully, that's not the case, and they still have DNA that they've reserved for further testing as DNA advancements and technology come along. All right, let's take a look at who else has joined us recently. Stace on the Case is with us. Glad to have you there with us. Let's see who else. Base Jumper is here. Shiva's Girl is here. Rowan says, shouldn't DNA be able to tell if that person is male or female? Just knowing that could lead to more tips. Yeah. As I said, it very well possibly could. And again, I would love to have someone on who's a DNA expert from one of these private labs, and I'm going to endeavor to do that in the coming time. Yeah, and to the other question about fingerprints, Rowan, I don't know of any fingerprints. We know the suspect had gloves on. Were the gloves on the entire time, including during the attack? We have no way of knowing. So let's see what else we have. Base Jumper says, do you know if the killer kept searching the church after the murder? Yes, we actually do have an answer to that question. Police said during one of the very early press conferences, maybe even the very first one, that the killer did not go in any other rooms after the murder. And we know that the killer had made a complete circuit of the church. They had been all around that perimeter, and they had apparently gone in the auditorium. So there was no room for them to go in. I assume that they hadn't already been in. And then common sense is you've just killed somebody. For all you know, someone else is going to be coming through that door too. So, time to skedaddle. So no, I don't. I think from everything we know, I think we should assume that after the killer had killed Missy, that they immediately left and got in, presumably their vehicle, and left. All right, let's see what else we've got here. We've got 28 people in the room, so good to have everybody who is here with us. Dr. Tuttle says, can touch be mixed? Again, that's a little bit beyond my expertise. I don't know if a mixed sample is just a fluid sample, or if it could be touch DNA, skin cells, that sort of thing. I'm just guessing that it probably can be mixed too, and that they can still work with that. There was a case, and I don't know names or anything, but I know that the break in the case was that the suspect, after he had killed the guy, reached into the guy's back pocket and took the guy's wallet out. And this guy left no DNA anywhere in the crime scene other than when he reached into that pocket and took that man's wallet out. He left skin cells from his DNA, and you have to think that they were mixed with probably the victim's DNA. And I know that they were able to solve that case and make an arrest based upon that DNA. So based on that, Dr. Tuttle, I do believe that the touch DNA can be a mixed sample, and that police can still work with that. Shiva's girl says, can we see the face? I'm sorry, the face of what? The face of who? I'm not sure who we're talking about here. Stays on the case. The lab in Houston is at Orthram. You know, I don't know the names of the different private labs or where they are. I know that you've got Parabon Labs, which is probably the most famous one out there for DNA right now. I don't even know where they are. Virginia, maybe? But I don't really know the names of the other ones. Stays on the case. I just wonder if it wasn't intentional, why they didn't just get the heck out of there. Well, I assume that you mean why didn't they just leave and not kill Missy? Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Stace, because that comes up a lot when we talk about targeted versus untargeted. And you would be shocked, I think, if you were to look at studies of burglaries and other crimes that are being committed where the person ends up killing someone and it wasn't really intended, but it happens in the heat of the moment. You're under great stress. I actually read something recently where someone with a law enforcement background talked about some training exercises they did involving armored car guards versus people holding them up, and they had them act out those roles, and then they had the armored guards play the role of the bad guy, and they had the bad guy play the role of the armored guard, and but then the that it was shocking to them that like 50% of the time they shot in training the person that they were holding up when they didn't really intend to shoot them. They didn't make an intentional with forethought, I'm going to aim the gun and I'm going to shoot, but they shot him anyway because the person froze, because they turned and ran away and it was unexpected, and in the heat of the moment and with muscle jerks and nervous spasms or whatever, people end up dead. So I think that it can very easily happen. It's possible that this person didn't intend to kill Missy. Even once they had her, once she came in and they're face to face with her, maybe the gun went off. Who knows? But you also have to remember that we are reasonable people, most of us, reasonable people who are trying to think like a suspect, but we're still bringing our reason into it and our law-abiding natures that I have, hopefully, and that you have as well. That I'm burglarizing a place. Somebody catches me. Well, I'm not going to kill them. I'm just going to go ahead and leave and let them live. Well, that's not necessarily what's going to happen. Now let's think about it. This guy, this man or woman, they have already broken into a church, something that's considered sacred to a lot of people. And even if it wasn't a church, I mean, you're somewhere you weren't supposed to be. You don't belong there, but you've already had the audacity to break into it. So you're already a person who hasn't made really good decisions, right? And maybe you're desperate. If this was a burglary, a lot of burglars are desperate. They're just trying to find some money, some hard cash, that they can use to fuel often a habit that they have. Maybe they're unemployed and they're just desperate for money, however they can get it, even a few $100s at a time. So if that's the case, if this is not targeted and it's untargeted, I think we make a mistake if we eliminate the untargeted scenario just based on the fact that the person killed her, because it happens. It's called felony murder. They have statutes and sentencing guidelines for this whole category of murder where a killing happens during the course of committing some other crime. So that's kind of my take on that, Stace. Let's just look through and see what else we have here. Da, 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 da. Paprika, glad to have you here. I don't think I've had you in one of our lives before, so glad to have you. Oh, Shiva's girl says, I thought they were able to get a face based on some tests they did. So that's what you were talking about earlier about the face. No, in that Waxahachie Daily Light article, they said that they had sent this mixed partial DNA sample to a private lab, hoping that that lab would be able to come up with some kind of a facial composite. Because that's apparently the expertise of that particular lab, whichever one it was. They didn't name them. But the sample was not sufficient. The quality of it and the quantity of it were not sufficient. So there is no face. There's nothing that I can show you there because police were not able to get anything from that. Okay, Base Jumper says, I read a theory that the murderer was expecting Missy to be a police officer, hoping for a shootout. Has that theory been ruled out? That's not a theory that I've heard before, Base Jumper. So I'm just kind of thinking as we go about that. I guess my issue with that would be, how and why would the killer expect a police officer to be walking through? And if you were wanting to have a shootout with police, why dress up as police? It's going to be kind of hard to get them to shoot at you if you're dressed like them. I don't know. That's not a theory that I've ever heard anybody say before, and just at first blush thinking about it, I would say that might be just a little bit unlikely. But there's so many different theories, that we can't rule out. So who knows? Stace says, I understand if they are surprised, but this person didn't appear stressed at all. Yeah, and my reply to that would be, I wouldn't be stressed either if I was in a building that was a church on a Monday morning in the rain at 3 a.m., 3:30 a.m., 4 a.m., and thinking nobody's going to be there for another several hours on this rural stretch of highway. If I were them, I'd be relaxed. I would think I had plenty of time. And the flip side of that is that if I were there to murder Missy, if I targeted her, I would not appear nearly so relaxed. I would appear to be stressed. If I was there to kill somebody and knew that was going to happen momentarily, I would be jacked up. I wouldn't be just, wandering around from room to room like I don't have a care in the world. So that's the other side of that. I'm sorry. Diana Wright says, do you think the battery in his prosthetic leg had run down? Yep, maybe maybe he got the cheap brand and not the Duracells. You got to be sure with these electronics and these high capacity things that you don't go cheap on the batteries. You got to get the high energy batteries. Okay. Stace says, I may be mistaken, but didn't SP surprise Missy instead of she, him, her? Well, I don't think we really know who surprised who. And here's where we get into, talking about Dr. Nierenberg, the forensic podiatrist, said on that CBS local Dallas station when they did that special that we talked about last month. He had some new quotes, a new interview with him where he said, he's seen footage that the public hasn't seen. He's seen the footage of Missy entering the church. Okay. And he says that she jerks her head. And he said as if she hears something. Well, there's no audio on that surveillance footage from those cameras. They don't have audio capability. So Dr. Nierenberg may have said as if she heard something, but he can't really tell whether she's distinguishing there. We don't know whether she heard something or whether she saw something or both. We only know that she walked toward whatever. All right. And we know from the very first press conference from John Spann, the commander, at the first press conference, said that Missy walks in, she walks up the main hallway, past the place where the camera no longer would detect her movement, and then the camera cuts off. Okay, that's all that he said. Nothing about whether the suspect saw her or whether she saw something. In a search, there's one search warrant that says that Missy walks toward where the suspect's location. I mean, it was a bad grammar, and I don't know what they intended to say. I can only assume they intended to say that Missy walked toward where the killer was located. But there's any number of, and it says that neither the suspect nor Missy is seen on camera again, and that the attack is not on camera. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about, because I think somebody who discusses this case in a podcast or something said that last month that Dr. Nierenberg on that CBS station news report, they claimed that Dr. Nierenberg said that he saw part of the attack. Dr. Nierenberg never said that. He said that he saw Missy walking, and then it was like a horror movie, and that, it's like, telling the person to get out of the house because you know what's coming. Okay. He didn't say he saw what was coming. He just said, what's coming because, he knows how it ended. He never said that he saw the suspect. He never said that he saw Missy and the suspect in the same frame. He never said he saw the beginning of the attack. He just said that it sticks with you, that he saw the video that he did see, and that he saw Missy walking in and starting to hear or see something, and then being powerless, wanting to yell at her to get out when obviously there's nothing you can do. So I did want to clarify that, because that is some information that maybe somebody well-meaning in the case thought that they heard Dr. Nierenberg say something that he really did not say. There's no proof. There's nothing to indicate that any part of the attack was on camera. There just isn't. And the credible sources that we have from police and from what they've written in search warrants and what they've said is that the attack was not on camera, period. And so back to your question, Stace, about, it could have happened. How they encountered one another could have happened any number of ways, and there's no way for us to know. I don't even know if police have a way to know. It just kind of depends on what the crime scene looked like, and they're not going to tell us too much about it. But I could see Missy walking up the hallway, and then the suspect coming out of the auditorium doors behind her, and she's already past the suspect. So the suspect is blocked from their exit on the north, and now Missy is kind of blocked from her exit on the south. So they're kind of at the wrong ends of one another. And then what happens from there, I don't know. But that's just a hypothetical. Maybe the suspect did not emerge from behind her. Maybe they saw each other from two long ends of the hallway, and the suspect ran at her, or maybe she ran at the suspect. But suspect's in police tactical gear, but it's just really hard to gauge how these two individuals would have reacted in a very surprising situation for at least one of them. Even if it was targeted, even if the killer was expecting Missy, Missy was certainly not expecting the killer. So you've got just a lot of unknowns there as to the physical nature of how they encountered one another. Okay. Let's just see what else we have. Your Tuttle says sometimes courts will not accept touch DNA as evidence. Yeah, I don't know too much about that. Paprika, does anyone else think her husband acts odd? Well, the husband didn't ask to be on national TV and be thrust in the center of this. Um, he's not a suspect. I don't know how I would react or how you would react if we were in his situation and your spouse was murdered and you're in the spotlight and you're not used to public speaking. By all intents and purposes, Brandon Bevers is not a social creature, not a social butterfly. He's a background kind of guy. So, DR Tuttle says we always say attack and then it was violent, but the only thing we have is the search warrant that says puncture wounds to the upper body and head. Cleanup guy said the scene was bad. There are lots of rumors that have no substantiation, rumors about things that were supposedly done to Missy. I have a feeling that most of those rumors are untrue. The funny thing is the people that seem to know all that information and were sharing things about, breast implants being removed and all kinds of stuff. Somehow they didn't know that she was shot. So if you got all this inside information, why didn't you know that? That's one question that I have. If I miss anything, if I miss a question that somebody asked, just ask it again. Trying to keep up with everything here. We've got about 35 people in here, which is great. Glad to have you all. Do we think there was a struggle before Missy was fatally injured, or did the killer do the damage after Missy was shot out of anger? Again, I don't think we have a way to know that. Now, I brought to you guys last month the information, and sometimes I get a little confused about what audience I've said this to, between web sleuths and some things that I've said maybe only there versus things I've only said over here on my YouTube channel. But Missy was at the northwest end of the church, near the doors, where the aquarium is, where the hallway is that goes in front of the kitchen, the north hall. She was right at that corner, by the northwest doors. And there was glass around her body. We know that from what police said in numerous public documents. There was a display case that had little toys and things. This was for the children who had memorized Bible verses on Sundays. They could come up there, and if they memorized a verse and could recite it, then they got points toward being able to get one of those toys out of that display case. So that's what that display case was there for. And that was the source of the glass. Now, did she crash through it? Did she and the suspect get in a physical altercation and both of them kind of went through it? Did the suspect shoot the display case? Maybe a bullet that missed her but hit the display case could have shattered it. Or maybe she was shot and then she fell and crashed through it. We know that it had to be close to her body because they said there was glass around her body. And I don't believe it was glass from any other source other than that display case. So, whatever happened right there at the point where she went down. Whether it was from a bullet, whether it was from her body, whether it was from the killer's body, or from both of their bodies together crashing through it. The hammer, the hammer that was in the killer's hand, that could potentially be what shattered the glass as well. So it wasn't necessarily the gun, but we just have no way to really confirm that because we have such limited information about it. Okay, here's a good question. Base jumper, if the murder was in the West Wing, doesn't that mean it was on camera? Well, number one, the murder wasn't on the west side. It was the northwest side. So it was up in the up in the far corner. Basically, when Missy came in through that awning entrance, that's at the southwest, and that hallway, that main hallway, goes straight to the other end. She was down at the other end. There's no camera down there. There were two cameras at the southwest, one which pointed straight north, and then one which pointed east down the Dutch door hallway, where the Dutch door room was. And so when we see the suspect on the surveillance footage, we see those two angles. When the killer is at room 1 and is trying to pry into it, and then gives up, and then walks across the camera lens, and then goes to the hallway where the Dutch door room is. That first angle there, camera angle, is the one that points down that hallway north. Okay, but even though you can see pretty much all the way to the end on that camera, the motion detection region of that camera doesn't go all the way to the end. When we watch the first part of that surveillance footage, and you see the killer come out of the kitchen, you see them run their hand down the wall, and then it switches to around room 2, and they just kind of pop up. There's a table, kind of a purple colored table, right there at room 2. That table is pretty much the end point of the motion detection, whether you're walking away from that camera or whether you come toward the camera. That's where it's going to cut off. That's where it's going to cut on. And so imagine Missy coming in from the southwest and walking north. So this north-facing camera catches her pretty much right away as she comes through the entrance. But then when she gets to that table and keeps walking, it's going to cut off within seconds. Even though, it doesn't matter if down at the other end, you've got the suspect doing jumping jacks at the northwest end, because that's not what the camera detects movements of. If somebody's in the foreground, then yeah, the camera's lens is going to catch whatever's down at the other end. But when there's nothing in the foreground in that motion detection region anymore, then the camera's going to cut off. So where Missy ended up, her body ended up at the northwest, and there's no camera down there. The nearest camera from there is either the one at the southwest or the one at the northeast. But again, totally opposite ends of the hall. So that would not catch the murder. And that's why the murder was not on camera. Okay, Diana, I'm sorry if I thought that you were joking. There are a lot of people that joke about the prosthetic. And if I misunderstood you, which I apparently did, I apologize. So you're saying it's a real issue if the perp has a prosthetic leg. If overused, walking a lot, the battery that helps lift the foot will run out. Maybe that's why he couldn't run. Okay. Maybe. I will say, it was interesting. The other night I was in Walmart, and there was a man walking in front of me who had a prosthetic foot. And so I didn't want to be creepy, and probably would have gotten kicked out of Walmart if I'd taken my phone out and taken video of it. But I just looked down and I watched him walk. And it's a very slow, plodding walk. And it's not at all like what we saw from that individual. So I would be absolutely shocked if this suspect had a prosthetic leg or a prosthetic anything. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I will point out that the forensic doctor, who is trained and has all this expertise in the way people walk, he apparently didn't think it was a prosthetic limb, because the police sent him the footage from all the persons of interest, including that former police officer, and he eliminated everybody except for that former police officer, and said that he could not eliminate him. Well, if he had determined that the suspect had a prosthetic limb, he would have been able to eliminate the police officer. But he said that he couldn't, so that leads me to believe that he did not think that there was a prosthetic limb. But certainly interesting to talk about, and who knows? I mean, stranger things have happened. Base Jumper says, was there a reason for Missy walking northwest? Well, yeah, she heard or saw something based upon what the forensic podiatrist, Dr. Nierenberg, said that he saw on the unreleased footage. He said that she jerked her head. She either saw something or heard something or both. And then she walked up that hallway. That would be really the only reason for her to go up that hallway, because where they worked out apparently was just inside the doors. The bathrooms were just inside the doors to the left. As far as we know, and from my sources that I've talked to about this, it wasn't Missy's habit to go walk through this church. She unlocked the doors because people could use the restrooms in there if they needed to. And then in this case, they were going to work out inside, but not in a room. I believe that they worked out right there in front of Holy Grounds, that kiosk. That hallway is 15 feet wide, by the way. So there's plenty of room for people to spread out and have plenty of room to work out. They don't have to go be in a room. And carrying equipment and stuff, it's just easier to be as close to the door as you can, so that you don't have to carry stuff, any further than you have to. All right. Talking about the walk, talking about the way this person walks, I want to share something with you guys that a lot of you have not seen. And you're going to find this pretty interesting, I think, when give me a moment and I'm going to find it here, and then I'll share it with you. All right, you guys see that? So this is several frames of an animation that gradually shows the suspect. This was taken from the actual footage, and a professional medical and technical illustrator did their magic on this to gradually take away the helmet and the clothing, to where all you have is the outline of their body. So I'm just going to keep showing this and let it repeat a few times. I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about this? Is this person skinnier than you thought? Are they about what you thought in terms of their body type? I also want to point out something here. You remember when we were talking about what Midlothian police said in their press release, that they said that the feet are turned outward, but the right foot more so than the left? I do not agree with them on that, and I have not agreed with that for some time. And I think that this is going to show that. And actually, let me stop for a second and give credit where credit is due. This comes from a user on Web Sleuths. Her username is BatBrat, one word, BatBrat. And if you go to Web Sleuths and go to the Missybevers threads, there's 46 of them. I think that if you go back to, I don't remember, it was the first year. It was like the summer of 2016 when she put this together and put it out on Web Sleuths. You can still see it if you become a member over there. And I would encourage you to, because there's great information on Web Sleuths about this case. So all credit to her, and this belongs to her. And I'm showing it to you simply because it's over there for anybody to see on Web Sleuths. But if you want to look at it in more detail, then please do so over on Web Sleuths. But let me show you on the feet. Okay, you can see where I've got it paused right now. You can see the right foot turned out. Okay, and now I've paused it again. Left foot isn't necessarily turned out there, or the angle doesn't really show it, but let me advance it just a little bit more. Look right there. I mean, that left foot is turned out just as much as the right foot, don't you think? Um, let's keep it going here, and I want you to focus on the left foot. Look at that left foot. How is it that the left foot, according to police, is not turned out as much as the right? I don't get that, and I don't agree with that. But um, let me know what you guys think about that. Rowan says this makes me think older man. Yeah. Well, one word of caution. I think that this is going to make us think man, but the hair is not depicted here. Okay. So there's going to be maybe a normal bias that we're going to have looking at this and just seeing a head that we're not going to think woman. But, this isn't the whole story. There's no hair here. And we're also not really able to see whether there are breasts or not. So keep that in mind as you're thinking man versus woman. One thing that does strike me about this, though, this person does not walk smoothly. They sure don't. I mean, they seem like they're plodding along. Um, and whether that is because of a physical condition or whether that's because of just being really non-athletic, I don't know. But I just think this is fascinating to look at, and I wish all those people that kind of have in their minds that this is a fat person, um, you know. Oh, and those people who think that it's Randy Bevers. Okay, from what you've seen of Randy Bevers, those of you who just have always been suspicious of Randy because of his mannerisms or whatever, Brandon's father, Missy's father-in-law, does this look like to you like this could be Randy Bevers at all? My opinion is no. My opinion is Randy is much stockier, much thicker around than this person. If we believe that this is an accurate depiction, and I can only tell you that when you go and you read, not only look at the work that BatBrat did on this on Web Sleuths, but her comments about her background and how she goes about um, doing this, it's pretty impressive. And to me, she seems very credible. And I think that this is a credible representation of what the killer may indeed look like. So this is the killer once everything's been removed. Um, we see the left foot turned out. We see the right foot turned out. Um, Notice how skinny the arms and the legs appear to be. This is not an athletic, this isn't a person with a lot of muscles. Okay, let me go back to your comments here and let's see. And I'm just going to keep this playing, as we go. Base Jumper says, from what you've explained, the police may not have the evidence we think they have. If the murder and escape isn't on camera, what do the police even have? It's a good question, Base Jumper. And I'll be quite frank with you about my opinion, and I can certainly be wrong, but I don't think that police have a lot that they haven't shown us. I was hoping that there were more cameras in the church and that there would be a lot of unreleased footage that we haven't seen yet that might show a little bit more about whether it's a man or a woman or whatnot. But there were only 4 cameras in the interior of the church, and they were only at 2 corners. So you had 2 at the northeast and you had 2 at the southwest, and the other 2 corners did not have cameras at all. So when you look at the footage that's been released to us, it's footage from those 4 cameras that we know of. And there's really not a lot of footage that we would not have seen, except maybe a little bit after the person smashes into room 9. with the hammer after they come out of room 10 and they smash into room 9. Maybe there might be a little bit of additional footage of them walking down that hallway and walking up that hallway before they went into room 10, perhaps. Maybe. But other than that, I don't think there is a lot of unreleased footage. And we used to think that there was. And as far as additional evidence, you know, targeted event that happened, like I believe probably it was, then there's just nothing for police to work with too much, other than maybe that DNA. And let's hope that they do have DNA that they can still work from. But they don't have fingerprints, I don't believe, because this person had gloves on. They don't have, you know, I'm surprised they have DNA at all, because this person was covered from head to toe, unless Missy was able to pull the helmet off or, you know, scratch underneath where the neck is, you know, something along those lines. Yeah, Rowan mentions holding onto the wall, using the wall to balance. That is something that police are interested in. That's, you know, at the very beginning of the video when the person comes out of room 8 in, you know, in the vicinity of the kitchen, and they make a right and they reach out and they touch the walls. So, you know, was that for balance, or was that just a weird quirk that they like to touch walls as they walk? What else, guys? Yeah, base jumper. You know, I think you're right. I was shocked that there's only 4 cameras in the interior of that church. I don't know what they were thinking, honestly. Why would you put cameras up in 2 corners and leave the other 2 corners without coverage, when your motion detection region is only going to be, you know, maybe 1/3 of the length of the hallway? So you're never going to be able to get footage from the other 2/3 of a hallway when the camera is supposed to be covering it from down the other end. All right, you guys have any other questions? We've gone a little over an hour, and how many people we still have? Well, according to what I see, we still got about 38 people in here. So glad to have everybody who's here, and I'll be glad to take some more questions for a few more minutes. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and stop that. Sorry guys, I'm trying to get back where I'm supposed to be, and I've made our pictures go away, which I didn't mean to do. There we go. Okay. The wonders of technology. Can you guys hear me? Did I mess up my audio? I think I'm still around, and I think my audio is still on. So Rowan to you says, is there any more knowledge about the baskets that the killer took? Actually, singular basket, just one basket, and all I know is what I've shown you guys already, which is that it's a Walmart storage basket, and it did have some small tools in it. I have a good idea of what those were, but I'm not going to talk about them because police need some things to keep to themselves. And from what I understand, what was in that basket wasn't anything that was of much use to the suspect in committing the murder. So, and the killer did not keep the basket for very long in their hand, and the basket was left in the church. So, but it's interesting how people really thought that this mysterious object was something that was used in the murder. I was a guest on the Armchair Detective on his podcast, and he seemed to think that it was a knife in a box. It wasn't. Other people thought it might be a gun case. People were taking their theories of how she was murdered and knowing the end point of what actually happened, and were trying to make this relate to that. And I even did a poll on my website, or not on my website, on my YouTube channel, a poll of things that you think the mysterious object might be. And I even put storage tray in there. This was shortly before I revealed that the storage tray is actually what it is. And I included a gun case. I included a box with a knife in it, a few other things, saran wrap, and the one with the least number of votes was storage tray, because it was just so mundane. People thought, that's not it. It's got to be something that was meaningful to the murder, but it wasn't. It just wasn't. Base Jumper wants to know if I know if they looked at old footage from the church, if anyone matches the suspect's walk. I don't know. You would assume that would be something that they would do, that they would look at old footage. I don't know how much old footage the church kept with their security system, but then that walk, with walking with feet turned out, is not all that rare, and a lot of people walk that way. So I'm not sure how helpful it would be, but I do hope that they at least looked at old footage. Jim Minshaw, has Brandon Bevers ever said that he's concerned for his own safety? Actually, yes. And that was another thing. I don't know if you guys were able to see and hear the Think Theo podcast. There was a 3-parter. It's a podcast that's on YouTube and also on the different podcast platforms, where she interviewed Brandon Bevers about the grief process. And but he talked about a lot of things. And one of the things he did talk about was how scared he was in the early months after that happened, after the murder happened. He talked about the lights that he installed around his house and how bright he made it. And so he was concerned about their safety, and he did take measures, along those lines. And if you watch, I don't remember which part of Think Theo, there were 3 parts, but he did address that. Okay, Rowan, what was meaningful to this person? Breaking in somewhere, not items of value, wearing a police uniform. Well, I mean, cash is an item of value, right? So you can't say that there weren't items of value that might have been there. Now, it turns out the church doesn't keep their deposits from the Sunday service there on site. But it would be reasonable for a burglar to think that maybe they might, and that might have been the reason the person was there, was to look for cash. Because it would be reasonable to think that maybe when you've had service on Sunday and the banks are closed, that you might put it in a drawer or in a safe, whatever, and then wait to take it to the bank Monday. But that's not the case for Creekside. Creekside does go ahead and take the money off-site to their bank night deposit or whatever on Sunday. So there was no money there, but that doesn't mean that the burglar didn't think there might be money there. And wearing a police uniform, hey, if you want nobody to be able to figure out anything about you, then that was a great thing to wear. Would you go to great lengths to go get that outfit and put it on just to go burglarize a building? No, but maybe it was readily available. Maybe it was hanging in a closet. Maybe it belonged to a roommate or a spouse. Um, let's see. Any cameras outside of the church? Kathy Pulliam, don't think you've been in our lives before, so welcome. Glad to have you. Linda Van Galder, glad to have you as well. Was any cameras outside of the church, and if so, did they capture the killer's vehicle coming or going before or after the killing? Okay, this is a good question too, and this is something that I got information about this, leading up to last month as well. So this is recent information too. There was a camera on the front of the church facing the highway. So we call that the west side of the church, where the main entrance is that faces the highway. Between the entrance and the north end, there was a camera that was mounted on the outside of that wall. That camera was not functioning. It had a known problem, and the church knew about it, where it would stop functioning, and someone would have to get a ladder and climb up to that camera and press a reset button, and then it would work. But then at some point, it was an intermittent problem where it would stop working again. So 2 weeks before the murder, it had stopped working. The church knew about it. They were kind of short-handed, and they just had not gotten around to somebody actually going and climbing up a ladder and hitting that reset button. So very unfortunate, timing-wise, because that camera has a really good view of the drive coming into the church, and would have gotten a pretty good shot of a vehicle pulling in and pulling out. So that didn't work out. Now, there's a camera under the awning, the southwest awning where Missy entered, and I've got pictures that show it. It's right on the wall. Like if you're standing in front of the southwest entrance on the outside, it's going to be to the right, kind of on that wall to the right there. And that was the camera, apparently, that police were able to see footage of the early camper that arrived that didn't know how to get in, didn't know how to work the door, and then other campers came in and they kind of all gathered under the awning and were looking at their phones prior to 5 a.m. That's mentioned in that geofence warrant that came out in 2019. The only way that I know that police would be able to see people gathering under the awning would be from that camera that's under the awning. And that camera is outside. It's not, I mean, it's still covered. It still has the awning over it, but it's an outside camera. So I don't really understand why police would say that none of the outside cameras were working, because we know that that one was. So it may have just been a mistake on their part, or maybe they didn't really consider that to be an outside camera because it's under the awning. One thing I haven't been able to confirm for sure is cameras being at the other entrances, and whether there were cameras or not, and if there were, did they work and did they get any usable footage from them? I'm told from one source that there should have been cameras at each of the entrances. So when you talk about the northwest entrance outside, should have been one there, should have been one at the northeast, and then one at the southeast. Plus obviously the main entrance and the southwest. So at least 3 more places that we know of that, according to one source, should have had cameras, but I don't know for sure if that is accurate information. And just because maybe there were cameras there, but did they actually capture anything useful? I'd be really interested to know at that northeast entrance, because that's where those outer doors were smashed through. So if there was a camera there and it was functioning, it would have been right there, and you would have caught, presumably, the killer walking up those steps to that landing where that entrance is at the northeast and smashing those outer doors. But we don't know. Police haven't told us. All right. Let's see what else we got. Ann Lee, glad to have you. Better late than never. Isn't that what they say? Is the SWAT gear the killer was wearing considered cheap? You know, in that 5-year release that Midlothian police just released, they said that it is unknown as to the authenticity of the SWAT gear. So, according to what they said, they don't know if it's real gear or if it's just a cheap costume. So that's all we know about that. Apparently, there isn't a whole lot that police are willing to go on the record with on that. All right. 31 people now. And we've been at it for going on an hour and a half. So I think I'm going to shut it down here in just a minute, unless anybody has a last minute question that they want to ask. Oh, this is good. Diana Wright, the helmet is shiny. Real SWAT is matte. And that is a very good point, Diana. And in the footage, you do see light reflecting off that helmet, and in a way that it wouldn't do if that helmet was matte black instead of glossy black. Some people have thought that maybe that helmet is a paintball helmet. And I've had at least one source tell me that they believe that most of the gear may be authentic in terms of the vest and the pants and all that, but that the helmet itself might be just a paintball helmet. Yeah, Shiva's girl says, I think they were wearing a balaclava and a headlamp. That is true. They had a balaclava, which is a ski mask, you know, open for the eyes. And then they did have helmet mounted lighting, and you can very clearly see that in portions of the video. Base jumper you're wondering if it's maybe someone who failed to become a police officer. Yeah, I can see that. At the same time, if a person has any connection at all to being a police officer, whether they tried to get in and applied and were turned down, or whether they were a former police officer who got kicked out, you would think that for them to dress that way, that it would be very risky to choose that as a way to dress if you have any connection to that whatsoever. You know, I've had people tell me, I think it's an actual police officer. Well, why would you dress as what you are? You know, doesn't that just put a big target on your back? But, you know, it's a little more subtle if it's, as you say, someone who failed to become a police officer. In which case, yeah, I could see them having a grievance and deciding to, you know, kind of show up the police by having footage of someone in that kind of gear doing damage, and, you know, whether they intended to kill also or not would be an open question, but to make the police look bad, I think, is what you're getting at. Cat Jersey Shore, another great one. Keep going. Oh yeah, I'm gonna keep going. Oh, you mean keep going right now? Well, at some point I gotta do some other things, but I'm definitely going to keep going in terms of following this case and doing what I can to document it and analyze it and encourage other people to spread the word about this case and hopefully get it to a resolution sooner rather than later. Yeah, it's been 5 years. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that we would still be sitting here 5 years later? Given how much there is that we know of, you know. Shivas girl, it is my pleasure. You know, I just really, this is one of my main purposes. I feel like I kind of fell into this case, but I found my purpose in it, and so it brings me joy to be able to talk to people about it, and I just hope that we can figure it out at some point. Anybody else have any questions before we go? Just want to thank everybody who have subscribed to my YouTube channel and made it possible for us to do these lives. If you are watching and you haven't subscribed, and there are plenty of people that watch my videos, I get the analytics on it. There's plenty of people that watch the videos and they're not subscribers. So if you're one of those people, please like and subscribe. I think the more I have, then it, you know, YouTube kind of prioritizes the videos so that they show up higher on people's searches. And I just want people to be able to find the information. It's not about me. I'm happy to be a background person, but what I want is for people to be able to find the information that's going to keep us all, you know, abreast of the facts of this case and dispel the rumors and the myths, and just give us a pathway to finding out what happened to Missy. So please like and subscribe, and I would encourage you to come over to Web Sleuths as well. I'm a designated case expert in that venue on the case, so I'm an active presence over there as well. And it's a whole different kind of a message board type forum, and it's very heavily moderated. So you have to mind your P's and Q's over there. But there's a lot of information stretching back over 5 years. Nothing has been deleted. So you can see what people were thinking on day one all the way to today through 46 different threads. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, it's worth your while. I'll tell you that. And it's free. So why not? Cat Jersey Shore, I don't know who Cop Facts is, but if you want to send me an email to gumshoestoriesmail@gmail.com, I'd be happy to look into it. Kathy Pulliam, I've subbed, and I'm going to go back and watch your vids on this today and tonight. Oh yeah, please do. Man, there's a lot out there. For example, the video footage that Midlothian police released is not in the right order. I've got an edit of it that is in the correct chronological order. So go look at that and see what you think. Oh, and the last thing, and I never emphasize this, and I don't want to emphasize it, but if you are gaining some insight and it's of benefit to you, any of the material that I do, and you have the ability to donate a little bit here and there, the only thing I ever ask for is just enough to cover some of the software expenses that I have. Like, I use StreamYard to do these live Q&As, and it does require a monthly subscription. There's other things I do to create thumbnails for YouTube and stuff like that are monthly subscriptions. So anytime you can donate a little bit, that's very helpful. And you can do that while we're on these live and A's down in the comments. I believe if you've got that little $sign, you can do what's called a super chat and make a donation that way. But certainly don't worry about it if it's a hardship for you. But just a little bit to help me recoup my cost would be much appreciated. So that's about it, I think. And once again, I appreciate everybody being here today. And I'll let you guys go and just continue to follow this case. And let's hope and pray that we're going to not be doing this for a 6-year anniversary or a 7-year anniversary or whatever, and that sometime in the next year this thing will be wrapped up. Pray for police. They've made some changes that have brought in people with some expertise, and let's hope that it makes a difference. Until we meet again, you guys take care of each other. Rowan, last thing before we go, I'll tell you what, in the description on this video, I'll put, I guess, PayPal or my Venmo. I do have a Venmo account. So if you're familiar with those and can utilize those and want to give that way, I'll put the info about that in there. So watch the description and I'll edit it after we close down here.